Are you using AI because you ran out of time? Are you using AI because you think that the material that has been presented to you is too difficult? You are becoming AI dependent, and this amounts to intellectual doping. How's your confidence? A few months ago, I made a video addressing the question of whether the use of AI in academia or academic writing is acceptable. And I put forth a proposition that if the use of AI undermines our ability to push the boundaries of the human brain, our capacity for critical thinking, or the generation of new knowledge, it's essentially intellectual doping. I would like to revisit this concept of intellectual doping, focusing on what it means for students in particular who are at the university level and using AI to generate assignments. There's a lot of discussion on what we could consider responsible use of AI, not just in academia, but also as students use it as a tool to facilitate their writing or thinking within this space. So here are some things that I think will be important to consider from a student perspective and whether they will amount to intellectual doping or not. I'm not going to address the question of what counts as responsible use of AI because I think there will be more evidence needed over time before we are able to concretely draw that line. Right now, I would like to explore the question of whether, and when a student engages in an assignment, the practices that they are doing amount to intellectual doping. First thing to note, if we are going to discuss intellectual doping within the context of student assignments, is that there are three main stages of student learning. The first is what we call surface learning, where a student is meant to get a grasp on the basic concepts that are being introduced to them. And they may not always necessarily understand them, but they will be able to at least repeat or define a particular concept. And then after they have acquired this surface learning, they have to move on to the stage of what we call deep learning. So in this case, they're actually able to, they understand the meaning of the concepts that they are grappling with. They are also able to tell the distinction, for example, between related concepts within that, and they're able to explain how they work. At the highest level of learning, what the student does is realize consolidation of learning. And what it means is that they can take these concepts or theories that are familiar and they apply them in unfamiliar contexts. So this is where the critical thinking skills, the analytical skills become very important. So all these stages of learning actually build on each other. Before you can consolidate learning, you have to acquire deep learning. And before you acquire deep learning, you have to develop, first of all, the surface learning. So in the end, whenever you produce a piece of writing as a student, you are not delivering just an output, but you are actually delivering the evidence of a very involved, thoughtful, and careful process that should be reflected in how you construct arguments and how you put together the entire assignment. So with this as the background, there are certain things that you will need to ask yourself in order to be able to determine if you're intellectually doping or not. The first that I would like to address is your motivation for using AI. Are you using AI because you ran out of time and then you just had to put something together in the time available? Are you using AI because you think that the material that has been presented to you is too difficult and you don't want to try to do it yourself? Are you using AI because you feel like everyone else is using it, so you might as well, so that you do not lose out in terms of getting an intellectual advantage? And by the way, I don't know how real this advantage would be relative to a student who actually puts in serious time. But if you would answer yes to any of these reasons, then you're intellectually doping. What you should do instead, if you ran out of time, just do your best to complete the task in the time that is available. Take the lesson, plan better, do better next time. Also, just allow yourself to sit with the problem and be comfortable with the discomfort of not understanding or not knowing, because this is how you actually develop those critical thinking skills. So it's better to sit with a problem for a long time. It's better to go to your lecturers and ask the questions that you need to ask in order to get unstuck. But you should be all the time consciously investing in your own learning and your intellectual development. Also, just make sure that you take the time to read. A good writer is a good reader. So the more that you read in terms of the materials that are presented to you, the more you begin to grasp not just the concepts, but how you will construct the argument and how you will approach the assignments yourself. So the time that you are given as independent study time mostly entails reading. And the only way that you can get better without doping is to actually read the material. The next thing I would like to address is in terms of the contents that you have generated as a result of using the AI process. So one question to ask is, do you understand the merits and the limitations of the material that you have generated? Can you spot any obvious issues with the output? So one of the things that we know happens with AI is that some people say it hallucinates, some people say it lies. So it can produce references that do not actually exist. So are you able to spot those types of errors, for example, in AI-generated content? Also, maybe more importantly, do you know what you still don't know? If you answer no to any of these questions, then you're intellectually doping. Some other questions that you can ask yourself, especially over time as you produce several pieces of assignment, relate to, again, very fundamental issues related to academic writing and intellectual thinking. So the first is, what's your capacity for original thought? So even though we are using AI for a lot of things, the originality of thought remains one of the most prized items, not just for the creative industries, but also within the academic sphere. So if you see your capacity for original thought start to diminish, then you're probably doping intellectually. Another important consideration over time is whether you are capable of problem solving and critically evaluating, especially output from any source. It could be AI, it could be a peer-reviewed journal article, but whatever you look at, you should have the capacity to look at in a critical way. So if you see this capability diminish in yourself over time, this is intellectual doping. Then the last question for you, if you use AI, is how's your confidence? So even if you will use AI just like any other tool, ideally you should still remain confident of your own capabilities to solve problems. So if you would use AI, let's say, to solve a particular problem or work on a particular assignment, that's, well, congratulations to you. But what was your capacity over time to solve new problems again and again and again and again? Okay, that's a bit of overkill. But I mean, the point is, what's your capacity to consistently solve new problems that are not familiar using the familiar tools that you have got? Will you also understand the ways in which you are getting better? Because this self-awareness intellectually is very important. And finally, will you understand your own weaknesses? So you will always have particular strengths in an intellectual sense, and you will have particular weaknesses. And this is also important to know because it affects, for example, who you collaborate with, what kinds of opportunities you put yourself up for, and what sort of self-development opportunities you're looking out for. So if you would see those capabilities, that self-awareness intellectually diminish, then you are intellectually doping. You are becoming AI dependent, and you will probably not be able to function outside of it. If it is just a tool, then it means that whether it is there or not, you should still be able to fulfill the requirements that are expected of somebody who has undergone university education. So the next time you are faced with the decision of whether you should use AI or not, just remember that there are thresholds within which it amounts to intellectual doping, and this undermines your own processes of developing as a critical thinker and lifelong learner. The things that you will need to consider is that your learning happens in 3 critical steps that are dependent on each other. You first acquire surface learning, and then you move on to get deep learning. And after that, you have to consolidate this learning. So if there's anything in the AI use process that undermines these learning steps, you are slowly entering the territory of intellectual doping. Then there are certain considerations that you would have to make also in relation to the motivation. Your reasons for using AI are very important. If you're using it for convenience, if you're using it because you would rather not face a difficult problem, if you're using it because you didn't plan your time accordingly, then you are not going to have acquired the necessary learning that is involved in a particular piece of assessment. Then this amounts to intellectual doping. You also have to think about it from a contents perspective. So whatever output you generated from AI, you should be able to interrogate and identify any flaws in that material and also understand for yourself what you still don't know. If this doesn't happen, then this amounts to intellectual doping. You also have to observe what happens to your own capabilities over time with the use of AI. If you see your capacity for original thought diminishing, if you notice that you are finding it harder for you to deal with new problems and to apply critical thinking skills, and if you see that you are less confident and do not think that you can function outside of AI, then you are becoming AI dependent, and this amounts to intellectual doping. So I started off by saying that this video is not about the boundaries for the responsible use of AI. But I think that if you would just flip what I just said and use it to think about the other side of what happens with not intellectual doping, then maybe you might have an answer for what amounts to responsible use of AI.